Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of From the Lighthouse. I'm Stephanie and I'm here today with my co-host Michelle. Hi Michelle.
Hi Stephanie.
And we're here today to talk about the Women's Prize. So the Women's Prize, for those of you who don't know of it, is a prize that is run out of the UK, and as the name suggests, it is a prize about women's writing. It is only open to women. It is for the best women's writing in English over the past year or so. So Michelle, what do you know about the Women's Prize, or what do you find interesting about it?
Well, look, I love the fact that it's open to a woman of any nationality. Although the book does need to be written in English, translations aren't eligible, and that's always an area of contestation, but you know, for the time being, it is what it is. And a full length novel, e-books are eligible. Not that I saw any on that list. And
e-books are a great unknown for me, Michelle.
Yeah, me too. I can't imagine coming across a book that way. But also the entries are put forward by quote established publishing houses, which, you know, is another, I think, element to sort of take into consideration when thinking through the types of books that get put forward. Because there's so many fantastic independent sort of presses that one wonders, are they eligible or are they not?
Or how much kind of space, even if they are eligible, how much space do they have to kind of enter these forums? Yeah,
because I think we do live in a time where those sorts of considerations need to be taken seriously and actually do need to be sort of brought into the fray when talking about prizes, because prizes are not unproblematic.
That
doesn't mean that they shouldn't happen, but it does mean that the sort of critical discourse around the sorts of entries that are brought forward, I think should be sort of foregrounded as part and parcel of that sort of prize discussion, and particularly because the prize itself is sponsored by sort of three pretty big companies, Bailey's, NatWest and Deloitte, which, you know, money is one of those non-negotiables when we talk about literature today. So
I quite like to enjoy Bailey's while I'm drinking. So for me, it's a natural kind of marriage, you know.
Well, Stephanie, are you getting a cup there?
No, Bailey's do
Would
not.
you like one?
I love one. If Bailey's wants to sponsor me talking about books, then you can catch me at Stephanie.Russo. No.
Yeah. But I think once again, it's important to bring these things into the mix.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because I think that transparency allows one to talk about the benefits, but also the problems around these sorts of prizes. But nonetheless, as any listener of our podcast will know, you and I are not going to dispute a women's prize.
We are absolutely.
We would love a world where it wasn't necessary to have a women's prize.
Yes.
There is no doubt in the world that that is the world that I think you and I are fighting for. But
it does not exist, sadly.
It doesn't exist. And so until it does, hooray the Women's Prize.
Absolutely. I'm not interested in having that conversation about why do we need a Women's Prize, because it's self-evident why we do, I believe.
Absolutely. And I mean, there have been some fantastic judges in the past. I love the fact that Chakrabarti, I would have loved to have taken more note of that particular sort of Women's Prize. Laurie Penny, Mary Beard, and last year the winner was judged by Obama. Which do you have any thoughts on that, Stephanie?
I didn't know that.
Oh well, there
you go.
So look, So I'm really intrigued to see what this particular panel of judges, it includes Katie Brand, Anita Anand, Catherine Meyer, Imogen Stubbs, and Sarah Sands, will bring to the table.
Yeah, well, I was listening to a discussion about the prize on the Guardian podcast, another podcast, and they were talking about how there's a lot of broadcasters and kind of actors and so forth, comedians on this judging panel, and will that feed into a kind of more populist winner rather than a kind of very heavily experimental reader? I don't know, but it's something that's interesting to think about, how the kind of the precise iteration of judges feeds into the kinds of books that win and are likely to be promoted.
Well, there's no doubt that a particular, there's a sort of stamina that is sort of a literary judge develops over, sort of years and years and years of reading. But at the same time, I think that it makes for a panel that's likely to be feisty. It's likely to be a little bit controversial, and there's nothing wrong with that.
We love a little bit of controversy here from the Lighthouse.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk through the long list because the long list was actually released on March the 8th, which was International Women's Day. And I should say here too that we are aware of the Stella Prize, which is the Australian kind of version of the Women's Prize, but we wanted to give an Australian book a little bit more attention. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait until the Stella Prize winner is announced. So the shortlist was recently announced, but we're going to hold off, wait for the winner to be announced. Then Michelle and I have both committed to reading the winner, and we're going to come and give a whole hour of discussion on the winner of the Stella Prize, whatever that book shall be. So we're not ignoring Australian writing. We actually want to give Australian writing a bit more attention than we give to writing from other places. But today we're going to go through the long list, talk about the books that we've read, the books that we haven't read, as well as, what we'd like to read and what we think might be snubbed, etc. So I might kick that off. The first novel on the list, we're going through them alphabetically, so we're not showing favoritism, although we will talk about which ones we particularly like. The first novel on the list is called Happy by Nicola Barker, who is a very, very well-established novelist. I read somewhere that it's her 12th novel. Very experimental novel. So here is the blurb from the marketing materials. So imagine a perfect world where everything is known, where everything is open, where there can be no doubt, no hatred, no poverty, no greed. Imagine a system which both nurtures and protects, a community which nourishes and sustains, an infinite world. A world without sickness, without death, a world without God, a world without fear. Might you be happy there? Happy is a post-apocalyptic Alice in Wonderland, a story which tells itself and consumes itself. It's a place where language glows, where words buzz and sparkle and finally implode. It's a novel which twists and writhes with all the terrifying precision of a tiny fish in an Escher lithograph. And a book where the mere telling of a story is the end of certainty. So, and this is the end of the marketing blurb. The novel won the Goldsmith Prize in 2017 for experimental fiction. It does sound very experimental to me.
It absolutely does, and this is one that I've definitely earmarked for the reading because it's always fascinating to see whether authors sort of push past sort of surface experimentations to do something that is genuinely sort of challenging and groundbreaking. So yeah, definitely Nicola Barker is on my to read list.
Yeah, it sounds. I mean, the line that kind of sold me is post-apocalyptic Alice in Wonderland. That sounds cool. And I'd like to see, as you say, if it's experimental, for the sake of being experimental, or is it genuinely pushing at the kind of boundaries of what the novel can do? That always interests me. So yeah, that's something I really, really want to read.
Yeah, and the next book on the list is The Idiot by Elif Batuman.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know very much about this author?
I have read this. I had complicated feelings about it. Can I ask you to read the blurb?
Yes,
for our listeners?
The year is 1995 and email is new. Celine, the daughter of Turkish immigrants, arrives for her freshman year at Harvard. She signs up for classes in subjects she has never heard of, befriends her charismatic and worldly Serbian classmate Svetlana, and, almost by accident, begins corresponding with Ivan, an older mathematics student from Hungary. Celine may have barely spoken to Ivan, but with each email they exchange, the act of writing seems to take on new and increasingly mysterious meanings. At the end of the school year, Ivan goes to Budapest for the summer, and Celine heads to the Hungarian countryside to teach English in a program run by one of Ivan's friends. On the way, she spends 2 weeks visiting Paris with Svetlana. Celine's summer in Europe does not resonate with anything she has previously heard about the typical experiences of American college students, or indeed of any other kinds of people. For Celine, this is a journey further inside herself, a coming to grips with the ineffable and exhilarating confusion of first love, and with the growing consciousness that she is doomed to become a writer.
I do love doomed to become a writer.
Yeah, journey further inside herself. What were your thoughts?
Look, I found this a little bit dull. It's a little bit meandering. It's very loose in terms of plot. It's obviously a novel that's not really about plot. It's got that kind of self-indulgence of early adulthood. Like, it sounds like a 19, 20-year-old being dramatic and awkward. I didn't love it, I have to say. It's had a lot of critical praise, but for me it was just a little bit too baggy and not quite focused enough. I mean, it captures well that kind of awkwardness of like your first kind of post-high school adult experiences and so forth. But I found it a little bit pretentious, and I found it a little bit self-indulgent. A lot of people, though, do love it, so I'm not sure if this is a case of it just not sitting with me as well as with other people. But I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would.
No, well, I mean, it's that sort of Bildungsroman, isn't it? And I guess it's one of those things, whether or not you sort of end up feeling that it's repeating something that you may not want repeated.
Yeah, I didn't really like being in that awkward mind space again. And it just sort of seemed to come to nothing for me in the end. So it left me a little bit lukewarm. But again, this has been something that has had a lot of critical love poured out. So I just don't know if I'm not the right reader of this novel, or if the idea of, revisiting one's 19-year-old awkward self is just something that has the connotations of horror for me or something.
Or in my case, was just so far away.
It's pretty far away from me too, don't worry. So our next book on the list is 3 Things About Elsie by Joanna Cannon. So the marketing blurb says, there are 3 things you should know about Elsie. The first thing is that she's my best friend. The second is that she always knows what to say to make me feel better. And the third thing might take a little bit more explaining. 84-year-old Florence has fallen in her flat at Cherry Tree Home for the elderly. As she waits to be rescued, Florence wonders if a terrible secret from her past is about to come to light. And if the charming new resident is who he claims to be, why does he look exactly like a man who died 60 years ago? From the author of The Trouble with Goats and Sheep, this book will teach you many things, but here are 3 of them. The fine threads of humanity will connect us all forever. There is so very much more to anyone than the worst thing they have ever done, and even the smallest life can leave the loudest echo. So have you read 3 Things About Elsie, Michelle?
No, I have not.
Okay.
No.
Can I give you a warning here?
Yes, please do, because time, if
Time
I'm going to
is
get
of the
through this
essence.
short list,
Yeah.
I have to I have to be expedient.
That's right. Well, I have read The Trouble with Goats and Sheep, which is Joanna Cannon's first book, and I found it insufferably twee.
Right,
it was
twee.
so very twee.
But that's unusual. Is that an unusual thing to come across, or is it just unusual in the books that we remember?
Yeah, no, it was.
I haven't read. I can't remember the last time I read a twee book.
Oh, it was all just very cutesy. It was like a quasi kind of mystery, but it was filtered through the consciousness of like 2 children, and they were very kind of precocious, and everything was like very cute, and there was a lot of like focus on like British desserts. You know what I mean? And like tea drinking and desserts.
I don't mind a bit of, sort of literary culinary exploration. If the desserts are good enough, I
don't mind like that cozy kind of crime stuff. But it was just a bit too cutesy, and I didn't find the writing particularly interesting or well developed. It was the kind of novel that, like, I feel like you could give to like your elderly neighbour who reads a book a year, but isn't quite what I would expect in a book that's been nominated for an award. That sounds incredibly snobbish from me, but like,
no, but I think that's I do think that the sort of the literary prize is meant to serve a sort of a particular function, because let's face it, sort of popular fiction gets a whole heap of other awards,
like
money,
cashola,
cashola, fame, movie deals, all of those sorts of things. So if the skill, if the sort of the original work, sort of all of those sorts ingredients aren't there, then why?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I haven't read this book. It might be she's had a quantum leap in terms of ability and execution, I suppose. But it doesn't really inspire me with too much enthusiasm to read it, I have to say.
Well, the next novel on the list is Miss Burma by Charmaine Craig. And the blurb for this one is a beautiful and poignant story of one family during the most violent and turbulent years of world history. Miss Burma is a powerful novel of love and war, colonialism and ethnicity, and the ties of blood. Miss Burma tells the story of modern-day Burma through the eyes of Benny and Kin, husband and wife, and their daughter Louisa. After attending school in Calcutta, Benny settles in Rangoon, then part of the British Empire, and falls in love with Kin, a woman who is part of a long-persecuted ethnic minority group, the Karen. World War II comes to Southeast Asia, and Benny and Kin must go into hiding in the eastern part of the country during the Japanese occupation, beginning a journey that will lead them to change the country's history. After the war, the British authorities make a deal with the Burman nationalists led by Aung San, whose party gains control of the country. When Aung San is assassinated, his successor ignores the pleas for self-government of the Karen people and other ethnic groups, and in doing so sets off what will become the longest-running civil war in recorded history. Benny and Kin's eldest child, Louisa, has a danger-filled, tempestuous childhood and reaches prominence as Burma's first beauty queen, soon before the country falls to dictatorship. As Louisa navigates her newfound fame, she is forced to reckon with her family's past, the West's ongoing covert dealings in her country, and her own loyalty to the cause of the Karen people. Based on the story of the author's mother and grandparents, Miss Burma is a captivating portrait of how modern Burma came to be and of the ordinary people swept up in the struggle for self-determination and freedom.
It's a very long blurb.
It is a long
I feel like
blurb.
I've read the book.
But that said, I mean, reading through then, I mean, one of the things that I think that particularly in, sort of an English-speaking context is sort of just being aware of how many of the hundreds of countries, nations around the world are effectively invisible, or just simply don't exist within a particular consciousness.
Yeah.
And I'm running through what I know of Burma, and I'm getting to the end of that list so quickly.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too as you were reading. I'm like, I don't know much about Burma at all.
No.
Really?
And I wish, I think this is actually one of the books that I have on my list to read, particularly because I've heard, and read sort of fantastic things about Charmaine Craig as a writer. And I think that, sort of when you marry together, sort of both, sort of skill and sort of that gift of writing with a fantastic story, the combination is often dynamite.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested to read this too, because as we were saying, I don't know much about Burma, and it sounds really interesting and something that I'd like to know more about.
And without necessarily, because it is that sort of thing where it becomes really fraught to talk about sort of learning through literature, or imagining that because one picks up a book on Burma, But at the same time, I think that you do a disservice when you also, for the same reason, refuse to talk about learning through literature.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, we do. To be realistic, we do learn about other places and other cultures through literature. So it's kind of disingenuous to say that we don't. Yeah,
and I think that there is a real sort of problem when sort of it becomes impossible because it's so sort of politically incorrect to talk about learning and being interested and sort of finding something through reading a book that sort of people are afraid to mention it. So for better or worse, that's without it turning it into sort of a literary tourism. I do actually genuinely just want to know more.
Yeah, me too. Oh, that's one for my list. All right, so our next book is Manhattan Beach by Jennifer Egan. So this is the long-awaited novel from the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of A Visit from the Goon Squad. Manhattan Beach opens in Brooklyn during the Great Depression. Anna Kerrigan, nearly 12 years old, accompanies her father to the house of a man who she gleans is crucial to the survival of her father and her family. Anna observes the uniformed servants, a lavishing of toys on the children, and some secret pact between her father and Dexter Stiles. Years later, her father has disappeared and the country is at war. Anna works at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where women are allowed to hold jobs that had always belonged to men. She becomes the first female diver, the most dangerous and exclusive of occupations, repairing the ships that will help America win the war. She is the sole provider for her mother, a farm girl who had a brief and glamorous career as a Ziegfeld Folly, and her lovely, severely disabled sister. At a nightclub, she chances to meet Styles, the man she visited with her father before he vanished, and she begins to understand the complexity of her father's life, the reasons he might have been murdered. Mesmerising, hauntingly beautiful, with the pace and atmosphere of a noir thriller and a wealth of detail about organised crime, the merchant marine, and the clash of classes in New York, Egan's first historical novel is a masterpiece, a deft, startling, intimate exploration of a transformative moment in the lives of women and men, America and the world. Manhattan Beach is a magnificent novel by one of the greatest writers of our time.
Well, Stephanie, you've read this one.
I have read this one.
What were your thoughts?
It was fine. That sounds really, damning, but it was really well written historical fiction. I really enjoyed it while I was reading it. It's really detailed. It's really evocative of a particular period in time, and the women working in the factories while the men were out, fighting the war and so forth. It's compelling in parts. I found parts more compelling than others, but I found that I lost the plot. As in, I forgot the plot. We know that I've lost the plot years ago. But I forgot the plot almost immediately after I shut the book.
Right.
And I felt like the ending was a bit too pat and a bit too kind of, tied in a bow.
Look, many's the book that I've thought I've not enjoyed, but then it has this incredible afterlife where I come to love it over the years.
Yeah. This is the opposite.
Yeah, the afterlife of a book is often, I think, its ultimate mark, and if you are forgetting it at this at this point.
No, I read it last year and I have completely almost forgotten parts of it. I just feel like it was fine. It was well-written historical fiction, but nothing new, nothing kind of, that makes your stocks go up and down. And it was just enjoyable in the moment, but I think that the argument that it is a masterpiece is very much overblown.
Well, look, there's a tendency to throw that masterpiece word around, and I mean, apart from its gendered origins, I think that there are other problems with using it sort of so often. I think I'll still give that one a read. I like a good noir thriller.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a noir thriller, but go on.
Yeah, just because I would be interested to see what goes on, and then we can talk about whether I found it as imminently forgettable as you did.
You'll have to carry that conversation, because what I remember is diving
would stick in one's mind. I imagine.
But there was lots of complex descriptions of diving, and I don't really care that much about diving. So that might have turned me off.
Yeah, look, no, I think with that perhaps we'll move on to The Mermaid and Mrs. Hancock by Imogen Hermes Goar. I hope I've said that right. One September evening in 1785, the merchant Jonah Hancock hears urgent knocking on his front door. One of his captains is waiting eagerly on the step. He has stole Jonah's ship for what appears to be a mermaid. As gossip spreads through the docks, coffee shops, parlours and brothels, everyone wants to see Mr. Hancock's marvel. Its arrival spins him out of his ordinary existence and through the doors of high society. At an opulent party, he makes the acquaintance of Angelica Neal, the most desirable woman he has ever laid eyes on, and a courtesan of great accomplishment. This meeting will steer both their lives into a dangerous new course on which they will learn that priceless things come at the greatest cost. Where will their ambitions lead, and will they be able to escape the destructive power mermaids are said to possess? In this spellbinding story of curiosity and obsession, Imogen Hermes Goar has created an unforgettable jewel of a novel, filled to the brim with intelligence, heart and wit. So, how are you finding this one?
I'm halfway through this book. I'm reading it at the moment. It is in my handbag as we speak. I am loving it. I love it. It is, first of all, it helps that it is late 18th century setting, and that is the period of time on which I work. So it is very familiar to me. And she's obviously done her research.
I was going to say, she's convinced you.
Yep, she's convinced me. She's done her research. She embodies that time, I think, particularly well. It's almost a conventionally told historical fiction, but the writing is clever. The characters are well drawn. It's a really compelling story. There's a little bit of it's not really magical realism, but the figure of the mermaid as a kind of myth and legend, is intertwined throughout the novel. I love the scenes between the courtesans, because half of the novel is set, at least so far, in this really high-class brothel, and the conversations that the courtesans have are really funny and really well drawn. I'm really enjoying this. I can't wait to get back in reading it tonight.
Oh, Stephanie, I think I might have to ask if I can borrow
surely
when you have finished. That sounds like something to look forward to.
Yes. No, our next book is Sight by Jessie Greengrass. So, it seemed at times an act of profound selfishness to have a child so that I might become a parent, but selfish too to have a child and stay the same, or not to have one, unless the only honest choice would have been to become this kind of version of myself without the need to bring another into it. Sight is about X-ray, psychoanalysis, and the origins of modern surgery. It is about being a parent and being a child. Fiercely intelligent, brilliantly written, and suffused with something close to forgiveness, it is a novel about how we see others and how we imagine ourselves. I have heard rave reviews about this on the interwebs. I have not read it myself.
Well, it sounds like one that we need to get hold of. In fact, I shall. Is it available?
I don't know if it's available in Australia. I've never seen it in the shops, but hopefully it will be soon. These things like the listing of it on the Women's Prize sometimes tends to speed the publication process around the world. So I hope that this is readily obtainable soon.
Yeah, I love that. I love the promise of that. Sort of a really sort of profound interrogation of sight in sort of, I guess, brought into relations of parenting, and it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, this is one that leapt up for me as something that's really interesting, I think.
Yeah, look, I think I shall endeavour to get hold of that book.
You do that, Michelle, and then you can lend it to
me.
And
then I'll pass that on to you. So Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman is the next on our list. Now, here is its blurb. Meet Eleanor Oliphant. She struggles with appropriate social skills and tends to say exactly what she's thinking. Nothing is missing in her carefully timetabled life of avoiding social interactions where weekends are punctuated by frozen pizza, vodka and phone chats with mummy. But everything changes when Eleanor meets Raymond, the bumbling and deeply unhygienic IT guy from her office. When she and Raymond together save Sammy, an elderly gentleman who has fallen on the sidewalk, the three become the kinds of friends who rescue one another from the lives of isolation they have each been living. And it is Raymond's big heart that will ultimately help Eleanor find the way to repair her own profoundly damaged one. Soon to be a major motion picture produced by Reese Witherspoon, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine is a smart, warm and uplifting story of an out-of-the-ordinary heroine whose deadpan weirdness and unconscious wit make for an irresistible journey as she realises ellipsis ...
Very dramatic.
The only way to survive is to open your heart.
That kind of makes me roll my eyes. The only way to survive is to open your heart. It's like, yeah, whatever.
It's a cliche.
It's such a cliche.
It's a cliche.
But I have to say, even though that blurb makes me think that this book would be, again, insufferably twee, I have heard good things about it, and it did win the Costa Debut Novel of the Year.
Look, you can't actually judge a book by its blurb because the blurb may not have been written by the author.
That's right. The blurb and the blurb wasn't written by the author. It was written by like all blurbs are written by marketing people in the publishing company. And I think that this blurb writer is making it sound really lame.
Really lame. I mean, even just the heroine sort of made me pause in a sense, and it just seems like a blurb that may have been written from times past.
Yeah, the smart, warm, and uplifting story. Blah blah blah. Yeah. But again, like everybody that I've seen that has read this has been like, this is really funny and
it's
good.
A smart, warm, uplifting story.
Yeah. Well, maybe maybe they just need to like hire a better blurb writer. Possibly. Yeah, anyway, I am planning to read this because I do like a difficult heroine, and like
I just love the idea of an unhygienic, which is, I find it so difficult to read unhygienic characters. I'm just thinking, sort of both the historical characters, because, there's lots of those.
Oh, yes.
Just turn your toes.
Yeah.
And then I think I'm thinking of Eileen Otassa Moshfegh's book, where she was a deeply unhygienic. I loved that book, and it's a very powerful figure.
Well, what drew me to this is the weekends punctuated by frozen pizza and vodka. I'm like, that doesn't sound bad. Anyway, I'm sounding like an alcoholic. This is the second time I've talked about alcohol in this episode. I'm not going to talk about alcohol again. How about that?
Well, not unless it results in some form of, sort of sponsorship.
Yeah, that's right. It's all about this sponsorship in there. All right, so we might move on because we're running out of time, but we've got next When I Hit You, or A Portrait of the Writer as a Young Wife by Meena Kandasamy. I think that's how you say it. So, seduced by politics and poetry, the unnamed narrator falls in love with a university professor and agrees to be his wife. But what for her is a contract of love is for him a contract of ownership. As he sets about reducing her to his idealised version of a kept woman, bullying her out of her life as an academic and writer in the process, she attempts to push back, a resistance he resolves to break with violence and rape. Smart, fierce and courageous, When I Hit You is a dissection of what love meant, means and will come to mean when trust is undermined by violence. A brilliant, throat-tightening feminist discourse on battered faces and bruised male egos, and a scathing portrait of traditional wedlock in modern India.
Well, what do you think? Have you read this one?
I have not read this one. I want to read this one because I heard, again, when I was listening to the Guardian podcast this morning, and they were talking about this writer. She's a poet, and she's very polemical, very feminist, very kind of, radical, and that makes me want to read it.
Yeah, and I mean already you can see the James Joyce. You can see so very much already in that in the plot, because domestic violence is sort of a scourge of contemporary society, and it's not an over there problem; it's a right here problem.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think that looks like a book to read. Which one of us buys it? We shall have to discuss after the podcast.
I will hop, skip, and jump over to the bookshop and have a look.
So shall we move on to
Yes.
by Fiona Mosley, which we've spoken about in past podcasts. And so just a very quick blurb here. Daniel is heading north. He is looking for someone. The simplicity of his early life with Daddy and Kathy has turned sour and fearful. They lived apart in the house that Daddy built for them with his bare hands. They foraged and hunted. When they were younger, Daniel and Kathy had gone to school, but they were not like other children then, and they were even less like them now. Sometimes Daddy disappeared and would return with a rage in his eyes, but when he was at home he was at peace. He told them that the little copse in Elmet was theirs alone, but that wasn't true. Local men, greedy and watchful, began to circle like vultures. All the while the terrible violence in Daddy grew. Atmospheric and unsettling, Elmet is a lyrical commentary on contemporary society and one family's precarious place in it, as well as an exploration of how deep the bond between father and child can go.
So I read this for the book, or I can't remember if you did as well.
No.
I really enjoyed this. I thought it was a really atmospheric, well-done story. The author is a medieval scholar, and even though it's a contemporary novel, you can see her thinking through the ways in which the landscape is still tethered into that very kind of feudal, very kind of almost clan-based kind of system.
So it's almost subversive on that level, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
in sort of a modern capitalist society with property and all of those sorts of things. So
I thought it was really interesting and well done. I found the characters really well drawn. The writing was very strong. It was intelligent. I really enjoyed the experience of reading it, even though it is quite a heavy kind of book in terms of subject matter. And it just, when I was reading it, the kind of overwhelming feeling I got from it is that this is a writer of great intellect who is in control of her material.
Right, and I can't remember, did that end up?
It was on the short list, but obviously didn't win.
No,
but it got shortlisted.
It was a long list. Yeah. Okay, so the next book is The Ministry of Utmost Happiness by Arundhati Roy.
I'm not going to read the entire blurb because it's incredibly long. So I'm just going to read part of the blurb. So the Ministry of Utmost Happiness takes on a journey of many years, the story spooling outwards from the cramped neighbourhoods of Old Delhi into the burgeoning new metropolis and beyond to the valley of Kashmir and the forests of central India, where war is peace and peace is war, and where from time to time normalcy is declared. I think that's where we'll leave it because it goes on and on and on. I haven't read this. I had a really big problem getting through The God of Small Things, so that doesn't make me want to read it.
Yeah, look, I know because that was a similar sort of experience, but I think sort of retrospectively, because I thought about this as well for the Booker.
Yes, because it was nominated.
Prize, yeah. I want to read this one because I think sometimes the book that doesn't fit, sort of the form is that we're sort of wanting from it is sometimes the book that needs to be read. So, and just because I've heard so much criticism of it, I think is sort of as times unfurled that I'm actually more invested in going back and reading just to see for myself. So moving on to See What I Have Done by Sarah Schmidt.
This is an Australian novel, by the way. Woo!
Oh, that's that's marvellous, and I believe you've read it. So perhaps you'd just like to give us a quick sort of rundown on it, seeing as time is
running out, so we may not be able to read all of the blurb. But it is a retelling of the Lizzie Borden case. So this is a case from the late 1890s, or the late 19th century rather, and it is about Lizzie Borden, who allegedly or was tried for killing her father, stepmother, and that's it. Her father and stepmother. It takes place in Fall River in Massachusetts. So this novel is about mostly focalised through Lizzie herself, but also focalised through a variety of characters that are around her. It's a very interesting book in terms of the way in which Lizzie is represented. I mean, she was eventually acquitted of the murder. There's a kind of open question whether she actually did murder her father and stepmother. She took an axe, is the way the nursery rhyme goes. Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her father 40 whacks. And so it was quite fun to read. I really enjoyed it. I think it sort of piddled out at the end. I felt like I didn't. And not that I wanted like the author to come in and kind of make a grand pronouncement on the case, because obviously that's not what this book is about. But I just felt like it didn't really end in a satisfying way. But I did quite enjoy it. I think that kind of moment in history is interesting, and the idea of the female serial killer, or the female, not serial killer, but the female murderer is interesting, and the way she explores her psyche and what would tempt somebody to do this is really interesting. So I enjoyed it.
I guess we're seeing parallels with the Atwood as well.
Yeah, it is a little bit like Alias Grace. It's very different in ways, but I mean, that kind of historical setting plus murder.
Yeah, and it would be difficult to write without some awareness of the Atwood. So the degree to which you bounce off that. So moving on, A Boy in Winter by Rachel Seifert. I hope that's how you say it. Otto Pohl, an engineer overseeing construction of a German road in Ukraine, awakens to the unexpected sight of SS men herding hundreds of Jews into an old brick factory. Inside the factory, Ephraim anxiously scans the growing crowd looking for his two sons. As questions swirl around him, where are they taking us? How long will we be gone? He can't quell the suspicion that it would be just like his oldest son to hold himself up somewhere instead of lining up for the Germans, and just like his youngest to follow. So any thoughts about that one, or heard anything?
I hadn't even heard of this book before it was longlisted. It sounds quite interesting. I'm not sure if it's available in Australia yet. If it is, I'll probably pick it up. Another Holocaust book. I don't know how I feel about that. It's not that I wouldn't read it because it's about the Holocaust, but I just feel like I've read so many, and I don't know if I'm willing to enter that kind of horrible space again.
But also as historical context, changes.
Yeah, that's true.
Holocaust, sort of the publishing of Holocaust sort of stories also change. And
that is true, yes.
That's also another thing to very much sort of be aware of, and whether or not this author is aware of it too.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that you can tell this sort of uncomplicated Holocaust stories.
No, absolutely. We'll see. We'll have to come back to that one.
Home Fire by Camilla Shamsi. We both read that.
We both read that, yeah. We both read that for the Booker Prize, and we quite extensively discussed it for the Booker Prize, so we're not going to spend too much more time on it. We both didn't like it.
No, we didn't, and I think upon reflection, because we do go back and contemplate the books. I think for us there were problems on plot, but also on the level of language and character.
Yes,
where even though I could sort of conceive of the theatrical structure underpinning it, and sort of the figure of. Sort of the God and the machine coming down at the end, because the end does sort of require you to accept that that sort of idea. I think there were just in terms of the imagining of the sort of the transformation of a character into a sort of into a terrorist. I think I don't know that I felt that it was. I don't know that I felt that it was complexly enough considered, and it felt too much aligned to what's already sort of out there in the sort of the ordinary discourses around sort of that transformation process. So I mean that's what you go to the news for.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt, and I felt like the ending was a bit over the top and melodramatic, and just didn't. I don't know. Just one of those books that just didn't work for me on any level. But I think we're the fish that swim alone on this one, because I have seen rave reviews about this, but both of us had the same reaction.
Yeah, and look, as I say, for me, it was just that I didn't feel that there was any insight that I gained from that book.
Yeah, neither did I.
And so without the insight, I can't. I don't go to literature to hear repeated what's already being said.
Exactly. Yeah. So what did you get out of it?
Simply sort of tying it to a myth and a dramatic, it wasn't enough for me.
The next book is A Trick to Time by Kit Duvall. I'm not sure. I'm just going to read quickly the first part of the blurb. Mona is a doll maker. She crafts beautiful handmade wooden dolls in her workshop in a sleepy seaside town. Every doll is special, every doll has a name, and every doll has a hidden meaning from a past Mona has never accepted. Each new doll takes Mona back to a different time entirely, and blah, blah, blah. I don't know, this kind of sounds a little bit twee again to me. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I have ambivalent feelings around dolls, so that's going to...
Because dolls are creepy?
Well, yes, there is... I'm not one... I was always disturbed by my friends who had a lot of dolls on their beds. I don't know why.
I have a lot of Barbies, not on my bed.
Yeah, well, look, there's a world of difference between soft toys on your bed and dolls on your bed, and my friends in childhood were often, sort of chosen based on...
I feel like you wouldn't have liked me in childhood, Michelle. I had a lot of Barbies.
Barbies don't count. They tend to go in boxes, and they don't. Yeah. You didn't stack them on your bed, did you?
No, I didn't stack them. I used them to.
It's the dolls on the bed.
You know what I did?
On the bed.
This is very literary. I used them to act out scenes from my favourite books.
Oh, well.
Wasn't I a great child?
Yeah, we couldn't. We can't sort of ignore the buxom Barbie, and I don't know, like I don't think even as a child I could ignore the buxomness of Barbie, but that's perhaps
so we have ambivalent feelings about this one. I don't know anything about the novelist. I'd give it a go.
I'll read it, and really I'm being a little bit trite
and I am being facetious too. Yes.
Yeah, so apologies. But we have been through 15
of
the long list.
We have been through, and we don't know anything really about this, so we're just being silly. So the next one is Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Ward. Did you want to read part of the
absolutely. This actually sounds like one that I'd like to read. An intimate portrait of a family and an epic tale of hope and struggle. Sing Unburied Sing examines the ugly truths at the heart of the American story and the power and limitations of family bonds. Jojo is 13 years old and trying to understand what it means to be a man. His mother, Leonie, is in constant conflict with herself and those around her. She is black and her children's father is white, embattled in ways that reflect the brutal reality of her circumstances. She wants to be a better mother but can't put her children above her own needs, especially her drug use. When the children's father is released from prison, Leonie packs her kids and a friend into her car and drives north to the heart of Mississippi and Parchman Farm, the state penitentiary. At Parchman, there is another boy, the ghost of a dead inmate who carries all of the ugly history of the South with him in his wandering. He too has something to teach Jojo about fathers and sons, about legacies, about violence, about love. What do you think? You've read that one.
I have read that one. I thought it was great. This is really, really good. It won the National Book Award in America at the end of last year. It's really well written. It's really incisive. It has a lot to say about race relations in America, which is obviously a conversation that's very much of the moment. Jesmond Ward is a great writer. There's a kind of ghost element that is almost a bit like Lincoln and the Bardo, but very differently handled. Yeah, really great. I enjoyed every bit of this book. It's very, very bleak. The circumstances in which the characters live is very bleak, but that should be no barrier to reading it, because it is very much a reflection on what people's lives are like in various places in America. And it was clever and incisive. I found it really, really enjoyable.
Well, I think I'd like to borrow that one,
yes,
if I may.
Yes,
and also I think in the ones that we're sort of asking to read, to borrow, read, purchase, etc., we're probably hinting towards the what we'd like to see on the shortlist.
Yes. I mean, definitely.
When is that?
The shortlist is announced in April. I can't remember the exact date. Maybe the 23rd, but I might be making that up. And then the winner is announced in June. So we might
reconvene.
Yeah,
and we do have Easter, so that's always an excellent opportunity for plenty of reading.
Easter is a great time for reading.
Yep. Plenty of time to get through those books.
Yeah, so are there any snubs that you can think of that you would have liked to have seen on this list?
Not off the top of my head, Stephanie, especially not after, the 16, I feel like...
you feel like it's well covered. I think there's too many books. 16 is too many for a long list, I think. I would have liked to seen a 12 and then a 6, as a short list. 16 is a bit too unwieldy. I was surprised not to see Sally Rooney's Conversations with Friends not there, which is an Irish novel about two girls and their kind of... hijinks that they get up to, which was a very clever book. I really enjoyed it, and I was surprised not to see the new Ali Smith Winter.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah, Winter. We both loved Autumn.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I read Winter. It's excellent. In fact, it may even be better than Autumn.
And yet, it's not on this list.
And it's not on the list. Maybe it'll be on the Booker. Maybe I can bully you to read it when it turns up on the Booker.
You don't have to bully it.
You're already on board.
Absolutely. Pass it over. Hand it over, Stephanie.
It's in my cupboard at work. So we just have to wander up the aisle and we will get it. All right. So thank you for that, Michelle. That was a long 16 books, but some really great titles in there, as well as some ones that we may not be as enthused by.
Which never judge a book by its blurb or its cover.
Or by its author's previous
Important
novels.
to finish on a moralising note.
I would never judge a book without reading it. Well, that is not true. I just have. But it was very unfair of me, and I shall read them. Yes.
It was lightly done.
It was lightly done. So thanks again to Michelle, and we will see you again, dear listeners, next week. If you could please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, that would be very, very useful, and send any suggestions or ideas for future episodes, or if you really want to take umbrage at our opinions about books, then do that, and we won't be offended. All right, see you guys next week. Bye.